Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
What's up? It's the GSMC Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. You know what time it is. It's Tuesday. That means it's time for tacos and for two people talking about football when there is no football. At least for right now. It's your main man, Brice, on the other side of the street. And it's your other guy on the opposite side. Name's Ethan. Brice.
Sounds like some prime social distancing.
How's it going, man? It's been what, a solid month and a half since we've seen each other physically. And I don't even know what you look like anymore, aside from when I saw you on Instagram Live that one time. Other than that, it's been a long time.
Yeah, man, it's been a while, man. Just know my hair is getting longer. So I look like somebody's dad.
Oh no.
Yeah, man. It's getting pretty bad.
Listen. There's nothing wrong about looking like a father. Some people like the look. Some people talk about the dad bod, the dad aesthetic. It's a thing, man.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace the dad aesthetic. And you might see some positive things into your lifestyle. Speaking of positive things, we have a lot of things to talk about. One of them might be more positive than others. But first things first, we have to talk about them boys, the Cowboys, America's team. The Cowboys get Andy Dalton for what, $7 million? I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It was he signed a 1-year, $3 million deal, which includes $4 million in incentives depending on playing time in the regular season, reaching the playoffs, and playing in said postseason games. So we know what this is, right?
Yeah.
Like we know what's happening here, right? Like this is Yacht Jerry acting up again, right?
Yeah, man. It's it definitely puts a Dak on notice, I guess you could say.
Like this is like, hey Dak, you want to hold out? I dare you. We got this guy, and if he can be half as good as he was, when their team wasn't crumbling beneath their feet, with the talent already around them, he's assuming that they're good enough to make the playoffs in the NFC East that are essentially a two-team race at this point. So what do you think, man? Like, I personally, when I saw the news, I was just like, what? Like, why would you do this? Just pay him. Just pay Dak the money. Or do you want to just keep beating around the bush? Because the fact is, Dak doesn't want to sign a long-term deal, I don't think. He wants to sign something closer to a 3-year deal, so that way, when the new collective bargaining agreement money comes in, he gets a piece of that. It sounds very smart. Him and his agent are thinking about his financial future in the NFL as an NFL quarterback. Jerry does not want to do this, right? Jerry's like, why don't you just sign this long-term deal that we'll just end up backloading and then pushing money in the front year in and year out, like most GMs do these days when it comes to quarterback money. So that way they have more cap room to move around year in and year out. But it doesn't look like Dak wants to be a part of this system.
Yeah, I think what this breaks up is a very interesting situation because, we don't know how Dak's going to take it, even though we think we know how he should take it. And I believe that making this move was just a security blanket almost if Dak did want to try to miss games because, obviously after Dak, like who was the backup for Andy Dalton? Do we even know? Like, do we know who he was?
Well, they just cut Cooper Rush, who was the backup before. So
okay, if Cooper Rush came to the game, I mean, are we really looking at the Cowboys as a real threat? Can he even though he has talent around him? I mean, listen, he could be somebody that could have took the league by storm and we got some new unexpected star. But I don't think Jerry was going to go with that route. It's like, okay, yeah, we got this guy. He's going to do it. So he wanted to sign a veteran that was proven like Andy Dalton. And remember, when Andy Dalton came into the league, and that's when Cincinnati was at their peak, when they had all this talent over offense and defense, he was making Pro Bowls. He was putting up numbers. So he showed if he put some talent around him, he can make something happen. So I think that was actually a good move in that regard. And you could even say it gives him the leverage now with Dak because it's not like we need you because we have no one behind you. Now we have someone behind you. So if you want to really do this, just know I'm not going to be tempted to make that move because we have Andy Dalton, who we think is good enough to still get us to win games and potentially make a playoff run. And that's why they have the incentives in there just in case Dak wanted to play that game.
Right. And for one thing, it's very funny because, Dak and Carson Wentz have been basically two peas in a pod when it comes to people comparing them to because they play in the same division. They came in at the same exact time and they both started at the same time. So naturally, they are always at odds within the fan bases about who is better, who it means more to the team, whatever the case may be. And, we all know about how Carson got hurt during his MVP run, so to speak, and a backup came in and won the Super Bowl. Now, Jerry just made this is what we like to call a pro gamer move. Jerry makes a pro gamer move here. He says, okay, you could potentially threat to have a holdout. Well, let me use my brain here. Let me remember not only a year ago when our best player on offense apparently, or really, Ezekiel Elliott decides to hold out during the middle of camp, right? Mm-hmm. And he's on vacation. So I have no choice but to pay this man $90 million or something like that. And Zeke comes back not ready. He's not 100% ready for NFL schedule yet. And granted, Dallas got off to a pretty decent start last year, but you could see it took Zeke a while to get right the way he needed to get right before he really started doing his usual levels of damage. He's not going to risk this again with the team he has now. They have too many offensive weapons. Too many weapons. Their defense is really young, fast, and talented. They can make a run. Jerry's not risking this run. He doesn't know. Jerry has to be thinking in the back of his mind, right? I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around. I gotta make this work while I'm still here. Listen, I'm all for Yacht Jerry right now. Let me tell you, Yacht Jerry is the best Jerry Jones we've gotten in some time here. I'm with this vision. It's a good move by a guy who's been around, who honestly I think he learns from his mistakes more than people give him credit for. Sometimes.
Yeah. It's just by the time you learn, the wins weren't coming to the level of where they wanted, and people are still wondering, should he give some power up?
Right. He has loyalty issues. That's for sure. So did the Bulls. I'm not comparing the Cowboys of the current era to the 90s Bulls, but the Bulls, their front office, they had loyalty problems. They wouldn't let people go for a long time, and it would be the detriment of that franchise at certain times in their existence. So similarly here, Jerry Jones has a legacy problem, or has loyalty problems to a key number of people in his front office and his coaching staff that he didn't really let go until it was time. Even now, I still don't feel like Jason Garrett got let go, got fired. It felt like a funeral more than like somebody just moved on. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's take a break and we'll get into the Pat side of this.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So, coming back, we were just talking about the Cowboys signing Andy Dalton, and if you were a betting man, you would think that the best situation for Andy Dalton to really rekindle his career back to life would, of course, be to somehow get involved with the New England Patriots, right? They look like they have a clear quarterback need right now that I think a lot of people have tap danced around, especially before the draft and then a little bit during the draft. But when it was clear that the Patriots were not going to be searching for their Tom Brady replacement, now we have to stick with reality here, right? Because at this point, I think it's time to give up on Cam, right? I think it's time to give up for the time being that Cam Newton is going to be on somebody's roster anytime soon. I don't know where Cam goes. And I don't think what's happening to Cam is particularly fair. I don't think he's like being blackballed, of course, out the league. I don't think it's that. But I do think that Cam is probably one of the more disrespected quarterbacks we've seen in recent memory. Like, he's not this bad. Like, He's not. He's better than Jameis. He's better than Jameis. Now, Jameis took a backup role. I don't think Cam is trying to take a backup role. And I think Cam deserves I think he deserves the belief that he doesn't have to take a backup role, right? He doesn't have to go do that. This is not like the Carmelo thing where Carmelo's getting up in age and, you know, the game is kind of moving away from him, but he still wants to be the superstar. I think Cam just feels like he hasn't had a healthy season in like 2 years. And when he finally feels like he's getting back on track, the league is just going to say, oh, no, we're tired. We don't need you anymore. What? I'm not trying to turn this into a Cam Newton segment, but this is about Jarrett Stidham. Like, the Patriots are 100% moving with Jarrett Stidham. And they don't think that, first of all, apparently there's pressure that comes with replacing Tom Brady, being the next face of the Patriots quarterback tree, and you have to live up to Brady's standards, no matter if it's fair or not. You have to be put up against what Brady used to do, and pass or fail, that's the rest of his career there for the general time being. And is that really what the Patriots want to do? What do you think is probably the case? Do you think the Patriots will find a way to get somebody else in there, or are they really going to roll the dice with Stidham?
I mean, I think that, you know, they are probably going to move forward with Stidham moving forward, because really, I just think one thing we also have to take into consideration about New England's system and New England and how they do things is that New England runs probably, because I'm assuming they're keeping the same offense they've had with Brady for years, one of the most complex offenses in the NFL. So it takes you a while to even be able to execute it before playing. So I can understand why they go with Stidham, because he knows the offense. He's been in it for a year, where if you bring in anybody else, they still have to learn it. And then especially with, you don't know how the offseason is going to go, you know, unless it was somebody who was just definitively like, oh, yeah, he has to start. Because, you know, there's no way Stidham's on the same level as him. To me, I feel like, you kind of have to go with Stidham in that situation. And listen, we may sit here and think we know what they have in Stidham, but we think, oh, he's not that good. But we really, truly won't know until he is put out there after getting the whole offseason of reps with the first team and see what happens. Now, I also think we talk about the quarterback position in New England, but we also got to look at the whole team as a unit is not as good as the last year's, especially offensively. Like, they don't really have I guess Julian Edelman, but we don't know how effective he's going to be without Brady. So, you know, in general, it's not like if you even got a quarterback, they're coming into a system or a team with offensive talent that is going to light the room up. So it does feel like, to me, Bill is just sitting on his beliefs, and he's just going to go with Jarrett Stidham. He's going to go with what he got, and he'll just see what happens. Because it's funny, because in a lot of betting odds, too, if you're interested in that, they still predict New England to have a winning season. And I think that's just the respect for New England, because you really don't know, are they going to crumble without Brady, or are they going to be good without Brady?
Well, you also have to, that's weird, though, right? I don't think that's a fair assessment. I think it's definitely the Patriot effect of you've never seen them not make the playoffs many years.
Or never be like at least good, because the last time they made the playoffs, they went 11-5. So, I mean,
right. But the thing is, even their defense has taken some hits. They don't have a lot of their top level players that they did last year on the defensive end. And their defense, although started off really, really insane, it cooled off, and it wasn't as dominant as we thought it might have ended up becoming later on down the line in that season. And I really do feel like this is going to be a case of where I think you're right. Stidham will probably end up getting a nod, and it's not because it'll be more so a factor of they don't have time to bring somebody in, or they won't have the appropriate time to bring somebody in that can learn the system, learn what it needs to be done. But also the fact that this is there's more possibility for the Patriots to be average or slightly below average as a team, just from a talent perspective. Because really, as talent goes, they're really gutted at positions that they really need some talent in. You know, they lost Kyle Van Noy. They have a running back problem. Like, Sony Michel isn't enough to cut it. If you listen to anybody who likes the Patriots and they watch Sony Michel, they know he's not it all the time. He's very wishy-washy when it comes to what he's able to do. They don't have a receiver at all worth a dime besides Julian Edelman. And Julian Edelman is not a spring chicken. He's a very seasoned, veteran. They don't have Gronk. They don't really have anybody in that position at tight end at all that can really do some things. And their quarterback situation is very, very up in the air. So
their strongest position is probably their secondary, just because they still have Stephon Gilmore, McCourties, and all of them.
Exactly.
Outside of that, every other position has been affected by losses.
Right. So this might just be the lost year for Bill Belichick. And maybe he's calculating this. Maybe this is just the power play for him to come back and somehow, win or lose. If he gets to the playoffs, right, he's the undisputed greatest head coach of all time, right? There's just no debating it. But if he doesn't, it's like, oh, look at the talent. He just didn't have it around him, and now they probably are in the race for Trevor Lawrence if they play their cards right. So it's really not you can't, Belichick cannot lose, particularly in this situation from a 1-year perspective. What he can lose is, of course, if more stuff really comes out about how in the past few years the Patriots have handled the Brady thing, I think that will look bad on his record, on his resume, and as a coach. Probably closer to not really a tell-all book, but how things start to leak out as years go by about just how the experience was being a part of those Pats teams. I keep saying I'd like to see a football version of Last Dance. The more and more you think about how this Patriots run really went, and you look at what happened with the Bulls and how they won all these championships and they were so successful, but there's just so much behind closed doors that a lot of people didn't know at the time because it just stuff wasn't readily available to learn about, and it was a lot of stuff under wraps. I have to believe the Patriots are probably the most under wraps organization in the NFL. And there's got to be some crazy stuff going on to where Tom Brady, 4 years ago, I could never imagine Tom Brady leaving the Patriots to go play football. Maybe retire, but to leave, to go play in Tampa Bay, literally the opposite direction of the geographical map. It just doesn't seem right. It does not sit right.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. It'll be interesting to kind of see what happens. That'll definitely be a storyline within itself. Just how Brady does in Tampa and how Belichick does with the team in New England. So definitely going to keep an eye on that. Probably whenever the season gets going and see what actually happens at the end of the day.
Right. Well, let's take a break and actually speak on the fact that the season might still be going on.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing, and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So the future of sports has been up in the air for the better half of the last month and a half of where we're going to be able to be in the next few months with football and fall sports, and if basketball can return, can baseball start up, what's going to actually happen here. And the NFL has already made some notions on how the 2020 season is being carried out as of today. Nothing has really changed yet, but the NFL cancels international games for the 2020 season thus far, so they will not be going outside the United States this year. The league announced this on May the 4th, so this previous Monday, that its 5 scheduled international games, 4 in London and 1 in Mexico City, will instead be played stateside due to ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And they said that they will look forward to returning for games in both countries in the 2021 season. And the Atlanta Falcons, the Arizona Cardinals, Jacksonville Jaguars, Miami Dolphins previously announced that they would be home teams for international games this year, so they'll instead be scheduled to play all their home games in their usual stadiums. The Jaguars were slated to be the first team to play consecutive games overseas, so the league was planning to feature 1 in Mexico City's Azteca Stadium, 2 in London's Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and 2 more in Wembley Stadium. So the NFL has been in Wembley for 13 straight seasons, which is kind of insane to think about. I didn't realize how many years they've been trying this overseas football thing for 13 years. That's actually pretty sizable, man. That's a long time.
Yeah, that's probably why they were thinking about maybe potentially getting a team out there, which obviously would be interesting if they did have a team overseas, but it would also create a lot of issues because how is that going to work? I don't think everybody wants to move overseas to play for a team just to come back to the U.S. after the season's over. But, yeah, man. Obviously, this is probably the smart move, I would think. You know, just you don't know what's going to happen, so you probably don't want to do any international things. Obviously, at least they already know whose home game it was, so obviously they'll probably just reschedule as, okay, it'll be just a normal home game for you now. And, you know, it'll be it'll definitely, like I said, this changes some plans. I'm sure that, you know, they got paid from people from overseas to do these games. And, you know, obviously not being able to fulfill that is going to we'll see what that does. You never know. They might double up on international games for the next year. We don't know if they're going to make up for it. But, you know, obviously, you know, international games in general have gotten a weird, have have been looked at very weirdly because it feels like those games are kind of like out there. Obviously, they're like the games that they advertise that comes on at 9 a.m. and in the morning. You know, they're the games that usually you see upsets or a team not play well. It feels like a lot of the games you got either sloppy football or someone's getting blown out. It just kind of feels like, in a way, it's not like when these international games happen, you're getting like top of the line games, if that makes sense.
Right. It's like if Thursday night football games ended up being at like Friday morning at at like this is your weekend time, and you have to wake up to go mow the lawn or something. It's never something that you really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden that we have this opportunity, you know, we have this free time, but it's just not there. It's just not what you want to do to start your morning. And I don't think people wanted to start. People have a tradition of not starting, especially in the eastern side of the United States. When we wake up, we have all morning to prepare for all afternoon of Sunday night or Sunday afternoon football, right? From 1 o'clock all the way to the late game, you have all day to watch football. So you have to take all morning to get your stuff together, right? Either if you're religious, you probably go to church. If you're not religious, you may go run some errands. You may go do some work or try to get ahead of the week now in the morning, so that way you don't have to do all this stuff while football's on, because football is as much of a religion, especially in the South, as anything else in the world, right? NFL's dominance on Sunday, it's the biggest commodity in television. The NFL is the biggest package, the biggest entity to have for any major network. If you have the NFL, you're making unreal amounts of money. Your income is completely unchecked unless someone else has a NFL package deal as well. So it's definitely something that internationally it was already tough. I felt like it was tough, but I thought it was getting better though. But I don't think there will ever be a team in London though. I don't think that was ever going to be a thing that happens. Maybe Mexico City. Now I think Mexico City would have a better chance.
Yeah, just because it's also closer.
Well, yeah, like could you imagine you're drafted to London or you're drafted to the UK, and
I don't think you'll be excited about that.
You have to get a work visa, probably to work outside the country. 2, every away game is 100% against you. Imagine having to go play the Chargers. Like, imagine
and then
that.
The traveling could be rough too.
Right.
Having to go way more miles just for a simple road game.
Right, like you would have to make their schedule like they'd have to be put in what, the NFC East or the NFC North, right? The NFC North would have to get them. You can't put them anywhere else, like anywhere else geographically, and they would just probably play a bunch of NFC teams, but at the same time, you got to balance out the schedule so they can't just not play the AFC. It would just be it would be a weird mess. It would be really weird. You'd see probably a team in Canada way before you'll see a team in the UK. And that goes to really any sport, to be honest. The reason why Europe gets it right with soccer is because Europe is basically touching land everywhere they go. It's not very far. You can get most places by train, and everywhere is in a closer proximity. It's more similar to how US is than like the US to UK thing is. That's like a 12, 13-hour flight. Every way, like way there, and then way back is 13 hours. Half a day.
Yeah, man. I just couldn't picture, like I said, doing the UK thing. Like I said, I'm surprised they haven't tried to visit, them getting a team in Canada. But I guess maybe just because maybe the Canadian Football League's there, they're just like, we're going to let you have your territory. We're going to let y'all have y'all thing. So we're not going to invade. So, it'll be interesting, too, to see if they even decide in the next few years to maybe even add a team or something. You never know if some cities might try to go back and try to okay, let's try to get a group together and bring another NFL cities. Just the problem is it's going to be a very uneven number. So it's just kind of like someone's division is going to have more than the other person.
Yeah. And that would probably mean that another team would have to be on the way too, just to balance it all out.
Basically.
I don't think they could just start bringing in one new team at a time. I think they would probably have to start, if they're going to start making expansion teams, they'd have to go two at a time. And I don't believe, well, actually, I don't know. I don't think there's enough. I think the talent right now is pretty high around the league, but I don't think the talent is so high that teams are just oversaturated with guys and not everybody gets to play. I think a lot of teams, the NFL is one of the more balanced sporting things in the world, and they still don't have the best of the best are still not always good, if you know what I'm saying. Like, you can take somebody's second-rate team or their practice squad team and stuff and try and build a team, but it would take a very long time for them to be anywhere close to quality, right?
Yeah, and remember Houston came into the league. They were bad for years when they first created their franchise, which is expected because, I mean, how are you going to get a good team in one offseason that of existence,
Right, especially
and everybody already on teams.
You have no draw, you have no fan base, you have no history. You have to build that all up from scratch, and that's a bit difficult.
I believe they just get awarded a very high draft pick. I think that's it. So you get the ability to get some of the top rookies in the game, but that's about it.
All right, but let's take a break, and we'll get into some New York Jets.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
So, the Jets are one of those teams where they did not have the best season last year, but they had a lot of things going on. As you know, Sam Darnold got mono during the middle of the season, and then he came back and they were a better team, but they still were not in any position to do anything substantial in the regular season or the playoffs. And we saw the worst stretch of Le'Veon Bell's career as a rusher. He averaged a career low of 3.2 yards per carry last season, while he also had his fewest attempts per game in his career at 16.3. But he had 245 more touches than the next Jet running back at the time, but not Bilal Powell. And it was the fourth biggest disparity in the league behind Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, and Leonard Fournette. And they're all at least there are 3 years younger than the 28-year-old Bell. So, free agency and the draft didn't do a whole lot for that fixing this issue per se, but Adam Gase does think that they have some guys in the backfield that will be able to lessen the load for Le'Veon Bell to where it's not all on him. And he said recently to ESPN, hopefully we'll be able to get some younger backs to where we can make some good 1-2 punches to where we can really excel instead of feeling like it's just all on him all the time. So New York's backfield at the moment, including Bell, has Kenneth Dixon, Josh Adams, and rookie LaMichael Pirine. So that is something to look at for sure. Of course, on the other side on the outside, they have Rashad Perriman signed to free agency. They have Denzel Mims and Jamison Crowder, of course. And then they also have Chris Herndon coming back after suspension and injury. So the team is trying to revamp, and as they are young and they're rebuilding at the same time, but they also know that you can't rebuild forever. And you have Le'Veon Bell, who is was once one of the most premier offensive talents in the NFL, and it looked like he took a step in the wrong direction, and maybe a step in the right direction is not making him come back, taking on a load that honestly he probably didn't really have in Pittsburgh anyway, so to speak. Would you agree?
Yeah, I guess you could say that, yeah.
I say that as in, like, maybe the running game he had to load, but it wasn't like the boxes were stacked for Le'Veon Bell. And they also had a really, really good offensive line all those years in Pittsburgh.
That is true.
And the Jets' offensive line was not very good. And in fact, they had to add new offensive talent, George Fant, and rookie Mekhi Becton this year. And their offense ranked 31st in scoring and 31st in rushing last year. So that all can't be on Le'Veon Bell, I would assume. And I think the Jets realize this and recognize this fact. So it's time to get with the program. And the program is running back by committee. It has been time and time again. I could name on 3 fingers, the size of a baby's hand, how many teams are not using the running back by committee strategy. Can you? Yeah,
it's really the same here, man. I feel like every team's using, unless you really got like a stud.
There's only two teams off the top of my head that I know per fact they do not use running back by committee. It's Derrick Henry and the Titans, and it's Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys. 2 teams that are very run heavy, extremely run heavy. And then you have to go ahead and throw in Christian McCaffrey and Ezekiel Elliott. And Leonard Fournette. That's it. Everybody else, somebody else is touching the football besides them in the backfield on a numerous amount of times. Even the best rushing attack in football last year in the Ravens, everybody was running. It wasn't just Mark Ingram. It wasn't just Lamar Jackson. Everybody had a touch. Everybody was getting involved. So it has to happen. This isn't a fault on Le'Veon Bell. You could see it with Pittsburgh when Le'Veon left. Finally, right? It's not sustainable to a certain degree, especially when people age and certain things leave. Like once Antonio Brown was off the Steelers, you could see, for one, James Conner was not the same guy. Juju Smith was not the same guy last year, and that could be for multiple reasons. But when you don't have all the weapons that they had, if the offensive line isn't as pristine as it was, things like having one running back do all the toting kind of get out of date and needs to change. And I don't expect that to change for any other team, for that matter. The Cowboys at a certain point ran running back by committee. I remember those days in like 2011, 2008 and all that stuff. They didn't have just everybody under the sun. Or they didn't have the best running back in the league. They didn't have, when DeMarco Murray came and they ran him into the ground, literally said, "Oh, we only get one more year of you. okay. They literally gave, like, it was his best season. He was really good, but they took every piece of tread off that tire they could, and you could see when he got to Tennessee, they had to go ahead and get another running back too, because he was behind, or Derrick Henry was behind DeMarco at a certain point. Am I correct?
Yeah, I believe they drafted him while he was on the roster, so they were sharing the road. So, the load.
Right, and people were like, why isn't Derrick Henry getting all the load? And like, why is DeMarco still running like this when it doesn't look like this is going well? Or you'll see Frank Gore still out there right now, and even people like me, I'm like, give Delvin Singletary the load, give him the work. I think he can do it. But that's just not where the league is at. You have to get these guys. You have to keep them fresh. You have to keep them. You have to stretch out their careers in different ways instead of thinking that, oh, you can really only have this back pristine for 5 or 6 years before it starts going down the toilet. And a lot of teams saying, no, we don't need to do that anymore. Let's just have these guys we may have them for 5 or 6 years, but they're going to be useful enough for probably 8 or 9 if they take care of their bodies, because they're just not going to be in situations where they're going to be carrying the ball 300 times a year like you would see in like older times, right?
Yeah, basically. Everybody's trying to extend their careers out, and so sometimes it's more effective in a running back community because, everybody has different skill sets. So you want to take advantage of every skill set you have on the roster. Or, maybe one guy is more of a power back, one guy is more of an elusive, scat back. Okay, instead of just saying we're going to go with one and that's it, you can both be effective in multiple situations. Because if it's almost also like, if you have talent, you want it on the field in some capacity. You don't want to just leave it on the bench because it's just like, oh, we're just sticking with one thing or we're going with it and that's how it's going to be. So definitely, man, I think, the running back by committee is that's just the way, and I think that's also a reason why the running back has been devalued because of that, because it's just like, I can get a guy in the 5th round and he can produce for me and he's not even never going to be my number one guy. Plus I ever have to pay him like a number one guy. So for a lot of different reasons, that also could be one of the reasons why the running back position is not looked at as important as it used to be.
Well, I wouldn't say it's not important. It just, the money isn't there for it. Because it's like the the ceiling is still very high for some of the best running backs in the league, as we see Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry. Like, these are some of the best running backs we've had in the last couple years come into the league. The skill ceiling is still there. It's just that the floor has become so high for running backs. So where big money is just not available. You can't pay a running back big money. It will cripple your salary cap because they just don't last. And if you pay somebody that type of money, you're definitely going to run them to the ground because you want to get your money's worth. But at the end of the day, if you spread it out some, you have a better team overall. And a better chance to win overall, really.
Yeah, that's true. Let's not forget, Adam Gase didn't even want Le'Veon to get the money.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's another thing. But let's take a break and we'll talk about the NFL's future.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, Brice. So I've been thinking, Trevor Lawrence is the new crown jewel of college football to potentially come into the NFL draft and be the next big quarterback star. And I've been thinking about where that possibly might land him at in next year's draft. And I gotta say, there are only like real few select places where I see a quarterback will be necessary, right? So the real blaring ones, I'd have to say, if things go bad in Jacksonville, I would assume that they would need a quarterback, right? Because they did just sign, or they traded for, who was it again? Because I know they still have. Oh well, they didn't trade for him. They were looking at
traded away Nick Foles,
right? And they were looking at
Gardner,
and they were looking at Andy Dalton. For a little while because of their recent offensive coordinator, Jay Gruden. He worked with Andy Dalton at the time, way back when Andy Dalton was at one of his best performances for that stretch of time. So it would make a little sense for him to at least think about that opportunity. But it's still just the Gardner Minshew show. And I would say that the Jaguars are in a hot rebuild. Like, it just came hot off the plate. They're very similar to the Rams, to where the Rams had this 1 year of epicness, really, and then the cap got bad and they just had to jump ship. Now the Jaguars had 1 year of really, really big time football playing. Their defense was really, really good, and their rushing attack was good. And at this time, Blake Bortles was seen as a guy that they could try and win with. He wasn't the best, but he was not the worst guy in the locker room. And then the season afterwards, Blake Bortles ends up becoming a total disaster. Their team is crumbling beneath them. There's infighting. There's the Tom Coughlin, Jalen Ramsey stuff, and then guys wanting money, and the Jaguars not going to be able to pay. And then they kind of just fell off, like really, really hard after that. And then last season, of course, they go get Nick Foles. Nick Foles looks good for a quarter and a half, then gets hurt. Gardner Minshew comes. All of a sudden, it's hope again for the Jaguars to maybe actually have a quarterback that they can believe in. But which at the same time, their whole team is still crumbling apart. Like, there's no way. First of all, the Fournette, they didn't pick up his option, so that's not good for him for being on that team next year. I highly doubt he'll be there. So it's like they're regressing, but also have hope in Gardner Minshew to be the guy for them. And I think if this thing goes south, you have to think that the first thing they have to look at is, we probably need to go get Trevor.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what you said when you started, like you said there wasn't a lot of teams that are just glaring. Because you're right. Like, a lot of teams are in a position where there are players that there is a jury out on, like, we're not sure about, but we won't know until the season plays out before we know, okay, yeah, we might need to go get Trevor. So there's a lot of, I guess, we'll have to see. There isn't that team you just know, they need one, no doubt. I
think the Redskins are one seat, or they just need a hot stretch of 2-5 before they need to see the Trevor Lawrence effect start to take the tank for Trevor starts to go into effect here. It just needs a 7-game stretch of less than 3 wins. You just need it. You need that and a little pinch of, we're going to start Mr. Allen a few games and bench the supposed starter that we. That's all you need. It's the perfect formula. And then I feel like the Bears also are in a situation where they're not going to give Nick Foles 2 years to prove something, right? And they're definitely not giving Mitchell Trubisky another year to prove himself. This is it for both of them as far as starter capabilities. That this team sucks. If the Bears suck, the Bears are going to get Trevor. Like this is, or they're going to go sign Cam in the regular. They're going to do something to salvage it. But this is not that situation. It stinks to me personally.
Yeah.
Because I just have a hard time believing, one, this is for competition's sake. Nick Foles is going to go try and win a job, and if Mitchell Trubisky can't throw a football 25 yards down the field accurately, it's going to be Nick Foles' job, no matter what anybody wants to say. That's the bottom line. Then you get to the Patriots, of course. Patriots are in a no-lose situation here. If they suck, they have nobody on their roster. If they go out and do some damage, Bill Belichick's the guy. He's like we always thought he was. There's no lose-lose here. And the only real lose is that if I'm still not that great, but they still win, what do they do next season as far as quarterback?
Yeah, that definitely is that's definitely a good question. But I have a question though, Ethan. If we don't look at who has a quarterback, who could you just seeing Trevor Lawrence and just say he would fit perfectly with this team? If you just had to think about it.
With the way he plays, I'd love to see Trevor Lawrence with Christian McCaffrey and the Panthers. Now, I know they just signed Teddy Bridgewater. I don't think it'd be very likely that they could get Trevor Lawrence within a year after signing Teddy to that contract. But I think as far as a team composition, I would be very interested to see what that offense would be capable of, and I would like to see it. But to be honest, I think that if he ended up, say the Raiders end up just not, Las Vegas just didn't do it. Like and they've already been looking for a way to get out of the contract with Derek Carr. Right? They've been trying to move off of Derek Carr for 2 years now, since Gruden has gotten there. I don't know if Gruden really likes Derek Carr. I don't know if the fan base likes Derek Carr. He had one good season and then he got hurt and then that was it. All it takes is another season of disappointment and then Derek Carr is off on the market or he's traded or whatever the case may be. And then they're in the running. I would assume. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It's just not that many teams that are all of a sudden in an instantaneous need for saying we need to fill our quarterback problem right here, right now. And
yeah, we probably won't know that till after the season plays out.
It would have to be a mid-season thing, right? It'd have to be a mid-season thing. I don't even think we didn't think that Cincinnati was going to be looking for a quarterback last year in the beginning of the season, right? We didn't expect that. We all knew Miami was probably looking for one, and
they have to think for Tua.
And we had there was an inclination that maybe even people like Tennessee was looking for quarterbacks because Marcus Mariota just was not it. And then maybe even the Steelers or Tampa Bay. There are just other teams out there that people were like, okay, looking for a quarterback probably makes sense. So it's funny though, because even the bad teams last year, besides the Bengals, if we look at it, there was only 2 quarterbacks that went in the really top of the rounds. Everybody else, they kind of had their guy that they're sticking with for the time being, right? So the Jets have their guy they still have faith in. Of course, we saw that the Miami Dolphins took Tua. We saw that the Bengals took a quarterback in Joe Burrow. And then the Lions, who wanted to trade down, let's remember this, the Lions wanted to trade down. They don't, or there was no offers that they like, so they don't trade down. They take a cornerback in Jeff Okudah because they already have a quarterback. They don't need to take one. And I think we're in a place to where we probably won't see a quarterback taken first overall, or we won't see many quarterbacks just go back to back like we have in previous years, like the RG3 year and the Jameis year. Like I don't think that's going to happen anymore. You might see one go in the top 5, but I don't know if first overall is going to be the way, because I don't think you need to get the first overall pick to get a quarterback. I don't think it has to happen that way.
Unless that's just your biggest need.
Yeah, of course. I don't know.
That's true. Oh, man.
But let's take our final break here, then we'll come back and talk about some college football.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
All right, so for the last segment, I wanted to talk about some college football news off the hot plate, off the stove. Name, image, and likeness has been a topic within the college football ranks or in this college sports in general for quite some time, because people believe that players, college athletes, should be able to get compensated in some way. And I think we've all learned, or we all know at this point in the game, the NCAA will not be forking up any money to pay collegiate athletes, especially because it's just too messy. There's too many parameters in what needs to be done. So the idea of players being able to make money off their name, image, and likeness is far more accessible and easier to pull off. But college sports the NCAA has been very, very sluggish with this movement. But recently they have really been forced their hand to try and make something like this happen, because state legislators and congressmen and women have been making the push to get these players to be able to make some money while in school and while playing for college. And what the NCAA doesn't want on their hands, of course, is 50 states with 50 different types of name, image, and likeness laws within their state's legislator, which would inevitably ruin recruiting to a certain extent, right? Like, if they don't fix this before, or get this in order before California's bill comes into action, then could you imagine the recruiting process when you just say, hey, 5-star recruit, you want to make some money legally while you're out here? Well, come play in California to Cal or to USC or to Stanford or anything like that. You're going to get money from just endorsement deals and being able to sign contracts. If that's not the biggest thing a college athlete needs to hear in order to go somewhere, I don't know what else you need to say on a recruiting trip. Like, hey, not only will you be a stud here and you'll get to the league, you also can make a good bit of coin here just from selling stuff with your name on it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think this is something also. Now, I think obviously we've all waited for a while. Obviously, the official initial push was in the Kansas City with football. Obviously, we know how popular that game was and how everybody was just like, "Pay the people, we want to play the game." So, obviously, every time any type of news like this comes out, this makes people hopeful the game's going to come back.
right.
But yeah, like you said, everything was true. Like, there's pressure from all the state legislators, like, hey, let's just pay these guys. Listen, you don't have to pay them as a college, but we can get third parties to pay them. And obviously, this could change recruiting, because if you go to a big brand, you're going to probably get more advertisements if you're a star player than if you're a star player at like a group of 5 school or something else. So obviously, that can influence recruiting, because like you said, you go to a recruiting trip, you can go to Alabama and say, listen, we're playing on national television almost all of our games. We make it to the playoffs almost every year. You're going to get advertisements. You're going to make money here. Now, obviously, this obviously this ruling that they're going to rule on is not just impacting football, it's impacting every sport. Obviously, we know how it's impacting, if you listen to my basketball show, basketball, because of the G League and paying players. So clearly, I'm really glad that they're going ahead and looking like they're going to go ahead and pass this when they have this official vote, because I feel like it's something that I think everybody agrees has been long overdue. I think that it's just funny how now they're being rushed into it. Now they can make the decision quickly. When all these years they made it seem like, it's a complicated process. We got to talk. We got to figure some things out. It's funny how pressure makes a company or a person make a decision or a format that works quickly than if you just have time to leisurely go on. So definitely, man, it's going to be interesting to see, like, when this passes, it's just going to be interesting to see how it changes recruiting. I mean, I don't think it'll change recruiting that much, but it might in some situations. You never know. Because even if you're not on, like, one of the powerhouses of a college team, you even just being in a big division, if you're playing the SEC, like, it's still the SEC. So if you can just make a name for yourself in the SEC, you're still going to get you advertisements, likeness, you know what I'm saying, get paid, even if your team's not that great. So I think it's just obviously some people have been worried about the Power Five getting too much power, and then they just get every player soaked in. But we'll have to see how it all plays out when it gets to it,
Right. And also, side note about the NCAA football game, that probably still won't come back because you need a group collective licensing to get the ability to use these players' figures, and then of course you'd have to get licensing from the colleges to bring the game back. So there's just too many hoops to go around. Like, it's just not gonna, like, this doesn't secure any sort of notion that college football video games are coming back. And I don't think this was ever a reason to think that, this why this was going to get pushed because people want a video game back. Like, this does nothing for the idea of NCAA football to come back. And it's more likely that somebody makes a game based on college sports without using college actual teams, and people just start making, like, they'll just source, like, it'll be really community driven, and they'll just start making uniforms for different colleges and things like that. You'll see later on down the line, like they do in every other sports game that allows you to create stuff similarly. So I gotta say, man, it's a bit disappointing though what they have on the list of ideas and stuff. It just doesn't look so well thought out yet. And a lot of lawmakers have said about this is that it looks rushed. It just looks like a PR stunt by the NCAA to try and get ahead of this and make nice with the public, and probably even get players and fans alike ready, like really, really geared up for the next season, and to give something to look forward to and give the NCAA a more positive note, because when inevitably they try and put this season down the fans' throats, and I don't mean that in the way of like we don't want to see football back, but it sounds like more than ever that football in the fall is something that the NFL and the NCAA are going to figure out a way to do. Like, this is not, if we can, or they don't seem very hesitant. Like, this is going to be a thing that probably is going to happen. They don't know when it's going to happen, but they do definitely feel like we're going to have football because that is what we do. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Like, this is not really a debate anymore for a lot of places and for a lot of businesses. And like you'd see in the NBA and the MLB, you see a lot more uncertainty on whether things will really come back in a certain way or how it's going to be structured in NBA in particular, because of you don't really know if they're going to be playing games in the regular season again to warm up, or are they going to go straight into playoffs? How do they account for seeding? Like, there were things leading up to the playoffs that were very much something that they'd have to try, and they're probably going to make some fans are going to be mad, right? Some supporters are going to be mad. Some businesses are going to be mad because their team didn't get a chance to make it to the playoffs, and thus that affects money. But I was listening to another podcast. I think it was the Bill Simmons podcast today, where they made a point like bringing sports back. What does that really do for the common person, right? Not really much besides entertainment, I suppose. But the businesses surrounding sports aren't going to be making that much money for the like business owners around the area and stuff, because they're still it's more likely that they'll be playing in empty stadiums, empty seats, no fans, rather than all of a sudden we're just putting in 70,000 plus people in stadiums again within only 3 months of being in quarantine. So that's highly unlikely. So it would be more so the TV networks and stuff. And of course, those people will have more job security, which is good, because I think we all forget about how the media, or when we say we all, I mean as a society. I know you and me can probably be a little bit more empathetic and also more sensitive to the matter of how media members are kind of getting in weird territory here at this moment in time when it comes to COVID-19, because of how much things can be done. And if you work in sports, you're kind of in limbo, because there's a lot of media coverage that is involved in sports. And if you can't do it, they don't really need you around as much, or you're potentially able to get furloughed and things like that. There's a lot of stuff riding or dying on this.
Yeah, man. It's going to be one of those situations, man. Again, we have to see what happens and just see how it all plays out, because you're right. Like you said, if they bring it back, I mean, nobody's going to be really making money. I mean, if we're being realistic, outside of the TV contracts and just having the shows, although the games on TV, you're not making any money for the arena or really the team outside of that. I mean, think about teams that are playing luxury tax and then like NBA. Think about teams next year because of this corona, the salary cap, and they might reduce how much money funding you put into programs. And it's a lot of things could be affected. So it's like, is really bringing the games back actually helping us in that department? If we still can't operate to the same capacity we've been able to operate to in the last few years, decades, etc.
Right. But that's going to be it for us, man. We won't really know until we see later on down the road. So speaking on later on down the road, this is going to be our end of the journey for this podcast right now. We'll like to thank you for listening, and don't forget to rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you do choose. 5 stars. 5 stars, please. And all that said and go, I hope everybody's staying safe out there, doing their part in keeping the country in good and not in harm's way, and keeping good health and being conscious of what's going on around you. But for Brice, this is Ethan. We'll see you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.